Hey there, everybody. Thank you for joining us on the Political Deep Dive this evening. Tonight, it is just me. So, we're going to be talking about Iran. But before we dive deep into Iran, and I'll try and pack as much history and current events into this hour as possible. I do want to talk about a couple of things. First off, we've got the 50th anniversary that's coming up. I'm sorry, this is the regional affiliate training. So go to mylp.org for the 2021 Regional and Affiliate Campaign Training Initiative. Find the training that is in your local area and sign up. It teaches you how to become a someone who can run a campaign, be a candidate, also to run an affiliate. So we need help in all of those areas. So it's a great chance for you to get in training, get know what to do when you're running an affiliate or running a campaign. So and you get certified, and we'll have future trainings to build on those certifications. So I highly recommend it. Go to that website and check it out. If you have any questions, reach out to Michelle McCutcheon or Kara Schultz and talk about it. They'll be happy to talk to you about it. The other event is our 50th anniversary. Let me get this one off. There we go. 50th anniversary is in Denver, Colorado. So 50.lp.org, or you can go to lp.org/50. Either one will get you to the same place, and you can register to come hang out with us in Denver at the end of August. August 27th, 28th, I believe, are the dates. I'd love to see you there. Come hang out with us as we celebrate 50 years of the Libertarian Party. So, without further ado, let's. I did want to mention a couple of things. We lost a lot of good people this week. Um, two former presidential candidates, and I know that there's some other people that if you feel free to drop their names in there, and I'll be happy to honor them. There's the gentleman in Colorado whose name escapes me right now, who helped police by shooting an attacker and was subsequently shot by the police. Again, his name escapes me right now. If anybody can drop that in the comments, I'll be happy to relay that. We also lost John McAfee this week. Uh, you know, Regardless what you felt about how he lived his life and or whether you hated McAfee antivirus or what, he was a great uh, example in outside the box thinking and living your life as you see fit. It was very sad in the manner in which he had passed on. Was being extradited by the United States from Spain by the United States, and his family are in my thoughts. Also today, 2008 presidential candidate for the LP nomination, Mike Gravel, former, I think it was Colorado senator um, or rep. He was the one who read the Pentagon Papers into the congressional record. Um, he ran for the U.S. or for the Libertarian Party nomination in 2008. He passed away. He was 91 years old. More on the left side of the libertarian spectrum, but he was a great thinker and brought a lot of good ideas to the fore, to the debate, and we've lost some real heavy hitters that have influenced LP politics over the years, and I'm it's a sad thing, and the let their memories be a blessing, and may they rest in peace, rest in power, and till we see them again. Anyway, all right, let's talk Iran. And again, this is a interactive show, so if you have any questions or anything as I present this information, let me give you a little bit of my background. Um, oh yes, John Hurley was the Good Samaritan who was killed in Denver, helping out the police. Police officer had been shot and killed. He ran to the sound of gunfire, engaged the suspect, and killed him. Wherein the police responding killed Mr. Hurley. Um, it's they haven't really officially. I don't think they've officially released that they've killed him, but pretty much it is common knowledge that it was the police that killed him. So very sad situation. Rest in power, Mr. Hurley. Um, and thoughts to his family and friends. But it's been a tough week in the LP family, and those people should definitely be honored for their service and their lives that they lived. So. Um, Let me give you a little bit of my background, why I'm doing a solo presentation on Iran and the United States. Um, Anybody who followed my show before I came to LPTV know that I did a two separate podcasts on Iran and U.S. history, and every once in a while I like to revisit this subject, especially when new things happen. And there's been a few things that have happened over the last few weeks, including the presidential election and a seizure of a ton of Iranian media sites by the United States government. But I want to give everyone a background of, why do we have a bad relationship with Iran? I know that there's some people who have little knowledge about Operation Ajax and the history between you know uh, the Iran hostage situations, the hostages in the Middle East in the 80s, and things that have gone on since then. But it's good to have a good total view of this whole situation. I'm a frequent critic of U.S. foreign policy, and I see the same mistakes being, that happen in Iran being propagated all over the Middle East, and we should point those out when we see them. So. Anyway, let me go ahead and share my screen. This is going to feel kind of like a college lecture because I'm doing a PowerPoint here. Apologies. This is really just going to keep me on track. But let's get back in the screen here. All right. United States and Iran. It is the constant conflict. We've been in conflict with Iran, direct conflict since 1953. And we've had friendly relations. We were, some of the best of friends with Iran for a long time. Um, but that relationship definitely is soured, and it affects our foreign policy now. So let's talk about some background here with this. So the basic background is that Iran, in the 1800s and early 1900s, uh, were kind of a toy passed back and forth between the UK and Russia, eventually the USSR. Um, you know, Basically, balance of power politics is that these main countries like Britain, Germany, France, Spain, um, Russia would try and influence the politics of, they have suzerain states, and Iran was one of them. And it was really between the UK and Russia. And so the UK and Russia would, interfere in Iranian politics. At this point, the country is run by the Qajar dynasty. It had been run by the Qajar dynasty, the Qajar family, since about 1750 or so. Um, uh, Persia, as the country is known at this time, is a long dynastic kingdom that it stretched back nearly 2,500 years at this point. And this is just the current family that was running it was the Qajar family. In 1900, they signed a concession with William Darcy, and which basically gives him all the mineral rights in this large portion of Iran to go seek out fortune. And they discover oil in 1906. Now, oil's not a huge thing in 1906. We're starting to get the car industry going. The airplanes are very nascent state at this point. Industrialization is going full throttle, but oil is not as big as it is now, of course. And but the oil concession that William Darcy signs with the Iranians, the Persians at this point, the Qajaris, he is basically the profit, the profits that his company, which would eventually become the Anglo-Iranian or Anglo-Persian Oil Company, which would later become the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, which will later become BP, uh, would only give the Iranian 16% after profit of the share of the profits. So it was a very bad deal. And as they go into World War I, where oil now becomes kind of a big thing, and it fuels some of early machines that are fighting this battle. And so without this oil, the Brits and Russians are not as able to fight. Now the Brits and Russians are friends at this point, kind of. Um, at this point in the war, again, the 1917, the Russians fall out. They have the revolution. The Soviets take over, and they kind of step back for a little while, and the Brits really take control of the situation in Iran. Um, in the after interwar period, after World War One, and so the Iranians were eventually able to force out the Russians with the assistance of the British. The Russians weren't giving a ton of resistance at this point, but they just wanted to, basically have control over the entire country. And one of the people that was involved in doing this was a guy named Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. It's the proper pronunciation of that, the Pahlavi dynasty. Um, he is a great help to the Brits in getting the Russians out. And because the Qajaris are so weakened, the Shah at that time flees to Europe, and the Brits help install the Pahlavi dynasty with the help of the Iranian Majlis, or the Persian Majlis, which is the constitutional legislative body. Um, Pahlavi begins to kind of expand his mind as far as who he should be working with in the world. He doesn't want just one country being, the only one he deals with. So he begins to look around and finds a country that is starting to, early 30s, starting to come up, starting to throw around some cash, starting to look to become bigger players in the international community. And he finds the Germans. Germans are starting to really ramp up their industrial production. They're looking for partners on the international stage, and Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, or Mohammad Reza Shah, as he's called, because he's the Shah, the king of Iran. Um, he begins to cozy up to the Germans, thinking that if I can diversify, who's backing me, I can diversify some of the money that I'm getting in for different things, then I'm not going to be so subject to the whims of the Brits or the Russians or whoever. Um, he renames the country to from Persia on the international stage. He makes the announcement that from now on we're going to be called Iran, which is land of the Aryans. Now, if we had social media back then, and Iran's Facebook page or Persia's Facebook page said change name to Iran, there would be a thumbs up below that, and it would say Adolf Hitler likes this. Because that Iran or Germany is all about the pure Aryan stock, and it really feeds into their thing. They think, we should completely we should completely get into cahoots with each other, because we love Aryans. You guys are the Aryans, so let's do this. It's a growing concern as we go into the late 30s, as war ramps up. World War II, early 1940s, the Russians and the Brits move to depose Reza Shah. I'm sorry, I've been calling him Mohammad Reza. It's Reza Shah, Reza Pahlavi. He is deposed in favor of his son, who's like 21 years old at this point. Mohammad Reza Shah, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, is installed as the new Shah. His father is deposed. He first goes to like Egypt, and he goes to South Africa, goes to the island of Mauritius for a while, and eventually dies in South Africa as the war winds down. And it feeds into some resentment between Mohammad Reza Shah and the Brits, which we'll see as we go on past the war period. As we go into the late 40s, there is more agitation about the bad oil deal that Reza Shah had brokered with the Brits, the renegotiation. And one of the things that really, and this is kind of one of the big flashpoints for U.S. and Iranian relations is that up until this point, the relations between Iran and the United States were very friendly and very the United States really kind of took a hands-off approach with Iran. Um, in 1951, Mohammad Mossadegh ran for prime minister, and because the Shah himself was kind of seen as a weak leader because he was put into place by the Brits, he had survived a couple of assassination attempts. He's still relatively young, early 30s at this point. Mohammad Mossadegh runs for prime minister of Iran and wins. And his main theme, as he was a socialist, he ran on nationalizing the oil. He said that Britain's deal with Iran was a bad deal. They weren't getting enough money, and it was a bad deal. Especially compared to what the United States negotiated with the Saudis, which was a complete 50-50 split. The Iranians were just getting a base amount of money each year from the Brits. So 3 days into his reign as prime minister, he nationalizes the oil. Initially, the Shah is okay with this. Again, he's not really powerful at this point, and so he goes along with this. The British are incensed, as I'm sure you would be if somebody took your stuff. Um, uh, the British had invested tons of money into infrastructure and really just to benefit BP, or the Anglo-Iranian oil company at this point. Um, but they're trying to get the United States to back them in an intervention. The power dynamic internationally has shifted. Right now, at this point, you don't make a move without the United States. So the Brits reach out to the Truman administration. They're like, "Hey, this can't stand." They nationalize the oil. We want you to get involved. Well, at this point, the Truman administration is already involved in Korea. This is when the Russians and the Chinese really start getting into the nuke game. And so they've got bigger fish to fry. So he turns the Brits down, and flatly refused to provide any material support to the Brits. So they cool their heels for a couple of years. They pulled out all of their workers. Now the way they set up the oil in Iran, all of the engineers, the technical experts were all Brits or expats. The real dirty roughneck jobs were left for local Iranians at uh, very low pay. So when they left, oil grinds to a halt in Iran. There's no oil being dragged out of the ground, and so we're um, you know Iran's hurting. Britain has lost a major supply of oil, and so there's this still stays in the back of their mind for 2 years. What changes is in 52, Eisenhower's elected. He takes office in January of 53. Um, Eisenhower's elected, and the UK go back to the United States, and they sell this as, you know, Mossadegh's a socialist, but he's getting cozy with this group called the Two-Day Party. The Two-Day Party is kind of a radical socialist communist group in Iran. They've been involved in assassination attempts with the Iranian, with Mohammad Reza Shah, and they're a banned organization. So they're able to sell this as to get the United States to back an intervention into Iran because of the Red Scare. If you look at a map of Iran, on the northern border are the former Soviet satellite states of Azerbaijan, and so there's direct access between uh, Iran and the Soviet Union. So it becomes a big selling point for the Brits to get the United States involved. So they launched this thing. United States intelligence and British intelligence launch Operation Ajax, and it's basically to get Mohammad Mossadegh out of power. And initially, it really is just a bad operation. It doesn't really work that well. But Mohammad Mossadegh uh, also plays into the hands of the United States. He angers the Ayatollahs because he's a secularist. He doesn't want religion in government, and he angers the Bazaris by wanting greater taxes and not delivering on a lot of his campaign promises. And then, as those constituents within his group start to fall away, um, it yeah. And Judith, thank you. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop a question. But as his constituents begin to fall away, um, he embraces the Two Day Party, the Two Day Radicals, and it becomes so untenable that he actually dissolves the parliament in 1953, angering the Shah at this point. The Shah dismisses Mossadegh. Um, and Mossadegh was like, whatever, do your thing. I don't care what you say. I'm going to stay in power. And the Shah, who is weak, doesn't really have anybody backing him. Not the Brits, because he's angry with the Brits. U.S. really hasn't gotten involved yet overly, so he flees. He freaks out and he's like, yeah, this ain't working. So he gets out of Iran, goes to Europe, starts hitting the ski slopes and doing the thing. Um, and the U.S. in response, they were actually about to pull out and just say, okay, we're just going to deal with Mossadegh. But Kermit Roosevelt, grandson of Teddy, says, no, we're gonna do this. So they double down. They spend $100,000 into uh, buying basically street gangs in Tehran to beat up two-day radicals, to start riots in downtown Tehran. They were able to convince the military to intervene. They arrest Mohammad Mossadegh and bring him. He's put under house arrest. He's not summarily killed like most U.S. interventions. He's allowed to live the rest of his life in home confinement, essentially. The U.S. actually had to go back to Europe and beg the Shah to return. The Shah was like, "I'm done with this place. I'm out." And so they're like, "No, no, we really got rid of Mossadegh. Come on back. Come take power. We're behind you now." So now the Shah now is starting to feel his oats, because he's like, all right, I've got somebody backing me now, and it's the United States. It's the big dog on the block. So he is emboldened. He begins to take absolute power. Now, I'm coding through a lot of history here. There's a lot of things, a lot of minutia that I could get into, but I'm going to cut through about 20 years of history here in this slide. The Shah is emboldened. He creates this group called Savak, which is the secret police. And the Savak is created with U.S. and Israeli and intelligence support. This is a flashpoint of why does Iran hate the United States, and why does Iran hate Israel? Part of it is Palestine when it comes to Israel, but part of it is because of what happened with Savak. Savak becomes a really brutally repressive secret police in Iran. The U.S.'s role in creating Savak, another famous name that people might recognize as H. Norman Schwarzkopf, was involved very early. Now, it was not the Gulf War general. It is his father, who spent a lot of his years in the early CIA and was very instrumental in creating Savak. Savak would jail a lot of distance. A lot of political opponents started getting thrown in jail. One of those opponents in the early 60s was a man named Ruhollah Khomeini. And everyone will recognize that name if you've paid attention to anything in politics or anything with Iran. The Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini was a cleric in Qom. He blamed Mohammad Reza's father for killing his father, and he frequently wrote op-eds denouncing the Shah, and he finally runs afoul of the Shah and gets thrown into jail. The number of political prisoners that are sent to prison require that they build a new prison built with German, I believe it's East German assistance. Evin Prison is open, and no, it was Western. I'm sorry, because they were U.S. suzerain. Uh, it was the West Germans built Evin Prison, which is still open to today. And if you are in Iran and you get told that you're getting sent to Evin Prison, you better be scared, because that is one of the worst places on this earth that you can get sent. The stories that come out of that place are harrowing. Um, and not only is he throwing distance in jail, and a ton of them, not only from the clerical side, but from the bazaris and the students. Anyone who speaks out against the Shah's rule gets thrown into prison. Um, he's also lavishly spending on the military. The United States is giving him all kinds of credits to. Uh, yeah, we'll talk about Khomeini's damage as he gets free. Um, uh, but the United States gives them military credits to buy, U.S. Surplus military stock and actual brand new weapons, brand new fighter jets. The Iranian military grows to the fifth largest in the world during the late '60s, early '70s, just on spending largesse, and we'll talk about some of that money later on as well. Um, but yeah, for a nation stuck in where they're at, to grow their military to the fifth largest in the world, they want to be that dominant regional hegemon. And the United States was kind of okay with it at this point. The other thing that he started spending on was the kind of the accoutrements of being a Shah, the kingly stuff. In 1971, they had the 2500th anniversary of the Persian Empire at Persepolis. Now, Persepolis is a ruin. It's not a city. It's basically ruins of a the former capital of the kingdom. Um, they decided to have a party in the desert. It's a 3-day party. This is not the fire festival. It is actually very successful, but they spent a ton of money on this festival, on this party. Um, Estimates were that the United States estimates they spent between 100 million and $652 million, and that's the U.S. estimate. I believe the French estimate, which says that it was triple that, because the French were actually the ones catering the event, building the tents. They built a tent city in the middle of the desert. There was, and it was not used after that. It was just built for this 3-day 3-day party. There was alcohol involved, which angered the cleric side. Um, you know, the finest French food, just the opulence. That it was the largest gathering of royalty in history. Um, and if you're taking the French version of it, they spent almost $2 billion on this party in 1971. Um, the who's who of international leaders were there. Again, just a ton of royalty. Basically, if you're royalty, you're going to be there. Spiro Agnew represented the United States. The I think Brezhnev did show up for the Russians or the Soviet Union at that point. But yeah, it was a massive thing for 3 days. 3 days, while the rest of the country was in abject poverty. Um, there was a small group of people that really benefited off of the Shah's reign, but the um, uh, average everyday American or Iranian was struggling. When they talk about people living off of $1 a day, it's not like you get at the beginning of the day you get $1 and you're like, well, if I save it for a couple of days, I can get it, something decent. No, that's basically all the stuff that you have in your life kind of equals up to about $1 a day. It doesn't mean that you get $1 a day, and that's really what they were living on, despite this opulent outlay of wealth for this 3-day event. This starts to feed into a lot of resentment with the Shah. Again, Ayatollah Khomeini is released from prison at this point, and he is sent into exile in Iraq. He first settles in Karbala, which is a holy city in the Shiite faith. And we can talk a little bit about Iran being a Shiite country versus most of the Middle East are Sunni countries, the Saudis, the Emiratis, the Jordanians. For the most part, those kind of and part of Iraq are Sunni countries. The majority of Muslims are Sunni. Iran, Lebanon has a large Shiite population. Syria and Yemen have large Shiite populations. But still, the Sunnis are dominant in the region. But Iran wants to be kind of that uh, big hegemon when it comes to those uh, Shiite people. So, Ayatollah Khomeini is starting to issue these tapes. Uh, in the Muslim calendar, Friday is when Muslims gather at the mosque to engage in prayers, and there's a sermon by the imam. And generally, in the Shiite faith, do tend to be political. There's not really a separation between, religion and politics in the Middle East. And what Khomeini was doing was he was recording these tapes, and they get distributed by phone. People would hold up phones to tape recorders and tape the messages, and they were distributed. So Friday prayers basically became this big talking thing for the Ayatollah Khomeini. It's basically, he was doing kind of Clubhouse before Clubhouse. Um, the other thing that happens for the Iranian for the Shah is that he's diagnosed with cancer in 1974. Um, uh, Evidently back then, I mean, what he had was treatable early on when he was diagnosed, but he did not want to leave Iran. He was paranoid. He had hubris. He thought that the Iranian doctors could take care of him. Eventually, brought in some French doctors. Yes, Judith, it was definitely before cellular service. Let me get some questions. Uh, let's see. Anglo-Zionist empire is done for. China's industrial process. Yeah, I mean, you could say that it's still going to take a while before China really gets to assert their dominance. If nothing happens, there's still some issues within China when we talk. Their population, whether they're really committed to the idea of that the China Communist Party is really dealing with. Um, so we'll see. Okay, I don't have to. Yeah, thanks. I've studied Iran for about 40 years, but that's cool. But anyway, yes, this was before cellular service. So, he was doing this over landlines, getting these tapes distributed to the Iranian people through the clergy. Again, the Shah's diagnosed with cancer. Hubris prevents him from getting treatment. It starts with Iranian doctors. Eventually, they bring in French doctors, two French doctors, to help treat him at his Black Sea home, kind of the secondary castle for or uh, what is I guess the castle for the king. But he gets really sick because he just doesn't get the right treatment. He doesn't go to, uh, you know, eventually he does go into the United States. He does go into France, and but by that time it's way too late. And we'll get to that in a moment. The economic and political situation began to deteriorate. Two big events happened during this period that really inflamed the Iranian people against the monarch. Uh, First is one is the Abadan theater fire. There's a packed movie theater that somebody locked the doors and set it on fire, and that was blamed on the Shah's people. Although it seems more of a move that the clerics would have done to anger the people. But yeah, it was blamed on the Shah. People started to get into the streets and angrily call for the Shah's removal, which is unheard of. This hadn't happened, but the people start to turn on the Shah. The second thing is Black Friday in September of '78. There's hundreds of people shot in the streets in a square in Tehran, and again, this further angers people, and more people start coming out into the streets. Um, Towards the end of 78, the Shah is invited to Washington to the New Year's Day celebration or New Year's Eve celebration with the president, President Carter. He does accept it because he thinks this will boost his image at home. Uh, Jimmy Carter is famous. Jimmy Carter, when he ran, was really big on the idea of human rights and standing up to people who are bad on human rights. The Shah was very objectively bad on human rights, and so 19 December 31st, 1978, Jimmy Carter is holding up a glass of champagne. I'm sorry, December 31st, 77, is holding up a glass of champagne to the Shah and saying, "Hey, due to the Shah's leadership, Iran is an island of stability in the Middle East. This does not go over well in the United States. It does not go over well in Iran. Again, the use of alcohol angers the clerical side, and the Jimmy Carter catches a lot of flack for toasting the one of the most brutal dictators in the world at this point. So we fast forward into 79, early 79. The conditions continue to deteriorate in Iran, and the Ayatollah, the Ayatollah is making, continuing to make statements about the Shah, continuing to inflame the situation. The Shah is getting sicker and sicker. There was a meeting between Carter and the British Prime Minister, the West German Chancellor, the French President, and missing somebody. But anyway, he meets with these folks. The whole thing, it was at Camp David. They were talking about the situation in Iran. The Shah takes this as he's about to get thrown under the bus by the by his backers, and he, just like with the Operation Ajax, he feels alone and he flees. So he leaves Iran. 6 days later, in February of 1979, the Ayatollah returns to a hero's welcome. Famous little tidbit: when Ayatollah lands in Tehran, the British press kind of gather around him. They're on the plane as it's taxiing to the stairs that'll bring him down, and he the British press are like, "Hey, you're back in Iran for like the first time in about 15 years. What do you feel?" And his response is, "I feel nothing." This kind of tells you what kind of the dude this guy is. He's not a real warm, touchy, feely kind of dude. He's pretty straightforward. Wasn't all about feeling. Wasn't all in his feels at this point when it comes to being in Iran. But he descends the stairs into a car, and he gets like Korean boy band treatment. Like the people are climbing on the car and slapping the hood, and they just want to get a look at this dude. And it's millions of Iranians that have flowed into the streets. Now, this is a period of instability in Iran. He doesn't establish that Islamic Republic until late 79. They kind of consolidate things. Some people are moved out. Some people are eliminated. But he's able to consolidate power and forms the Islamic Republic in December of 79. After this happens, there's rumors that U.S. NATO general has been talking with some of the military leaders in Iran, perhaps about staging a coup. But the students, now remember, these students are the children of the people who went through Mohammad Mossadegh and the overthrow. So they're very keenly aware of, the U.S. overthrowing the elected or the leader of the country leads to 25 years of just brutal repression. So they didn't want that. They go storm the U.S. embassy. First, it was just to tell the United States to lay off. They were throwing stuff at the embassy, but finally they break through the gates and they storm the embassy and they take hostages. I believe about 44 hostages. I'm sorry, 54 hostages were taken, and anybody who was alive at that point can tell you that was a 444-day crisis that you know we were subjected to every day. We were reminded how long the Iranian, the U.S. people were being held prisoner in Iran. Of course, this is the the premise behind the movie Argo. This is all all this is going on at the same time. Uh, the U.S. Television show Nightline begins because of this. Walter Cronkite, the CBS newsman, would say, "Day 356 of the Iranian hostage crisis." Same thing. That the counter was always there. Um, uh, During this crisis, Jimmy Carter authorizes something called Operation Eagle Claw, where a few helicopters are sent in to liberate the hostages. It is a spectacular failure. They don't even get towards Tehran. One of the helicopters goes down in the desert, and some lives are lost. Jimmy Carter looks impotent, not only with the economic issues, but with this. It just contributes to a humiliating defeat in the 1980 presidential election. And to give you an idea of how much Iran hated Jimmy Carter, they did not release the hostages until 12 p.m. Eastern Time on January 20th, 1980, or 1981. The moment that Ronald Reagan became president of the United States, that's when they released the hostages to go back to the United States. That's how much they hated Jimmy Carter. They did not want this anything to be given as a victory to Jimmy Carter, because Jimmy Carter had toasted the Shah. That for a while he was in exile, Jimmy Carter, the Shah was in the United States getting medical treatment. One of the demands of the hostage takers was to return the Shah for trial. Of course, the Shah dies during the middle of this, so that inflames tensions even more. And so we're this is the point where the hostages are returned. We have a little bit of a kind of a downtime between the United States and Iran, because almost immediately after the hostages are released, Iraq attacks Iran, and Iraq wants a larger port facility to ship their oil from. So they have their sights set on the Abadan region of Iran. So they go into Iran, and this is one of the first many proxy wars um, that are fought between the United States and Iran. Um, this is the big thing here. Uh, uh, we start selling Iraq because they're the enemy of my enemy is my friend. We start selling them weapons, including agricultural stuff that can be made into chemical weapons. Full knowledge of Donald Rumsfeld, that bastard. Um, and those weapons are, a lot of people know that Iraq used chemical weapons on their own people, but they also used chemical weapons extensively in the Iran-Iraq war. Um, and again, this is another flashpoint that Iran really hates. Iranian people are really angry at the United States government over that we sold chemical weapons to Iran or to Iraq, and Saddam Hussein used them on them during this just awful war. So the bitter feud really starts now. Now Iran is kind of like on even footing with the United States. That they're able to do things now. They're not under the United States thumb. So we're starting to see kind of a tit for tat. You know, do this, and then there's retaliation. But we're also seeing some weird collaboration that we'll get into. So, Iran starts providing material support for terror groups like Hezbollah, and those terror groups start taking hostages using the instability of Lebanon, who was going through a civil war at that point. Um, let's see. Yep, the hostages returns in 1980. But yeah, I mean, this was the hostages. Basically, they were taking hostages from students and professors at the American University of Beirut, business leaders that were doing business in Lebanon despite this civil war. They were being taken hostage throughout Beirut. It was a very dangerous time to be in Beirut. Iran was also mining the Persian Gulf shipping lanes to disrupt oil going to the United States. The United States responded by flagging foreign tankers as U.S. ships, basically saying if our ships get hit, we will come after you. Um, the United States increased a lot of their ship traffic in the Persian Gulf, particularly the narrow part called the Straits of Hormuz between the UAE, Oman, and Iran. And uh, during this time, there was a ship called the USS Vincennes that mistook a Iranian air flight number 655 going between Tehran and Tabriz and Dubai for a missile, and they shot it down, and which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. The first time I ever saw a dead body on TV was watching them pluck the poor unfortunate people from this airliner that was shot down out of the water, and it was very very impressionable on me. But I was really beginning to focus on Iran at this point when I was, even a young kid. I was 13, 14 years old at this point. Um, Partially because this was also background to the Iran-Contra affair. Now, the Iran-Contra affair is probably one of the most head-scratching moments in U.S. history. That this country that we hated, and Reagan was famous for saying that we don't deal with Iran, we don't deal with terrorists. But they had a strategic thing that they wanted to do. They wanted to fund this Contra rebels in Nicaragua, and Congress had forbidden them from doing that. And so we're talking about, the money that we decided to sell weapons to Iran to be able to funnel that money to Iraq, or to funnel that money to the Contras so they could buy weapons to fight against the Sandinistas. Um, it doesn't make sense, but then you have to realize that at this point we've fallen out of favor with Saddam Hussein, or at least Saddam has fallen out of favor with us. So we weren't all that broken up about giving the Iranians weapons to fight the Iraqis and letting them blow themselves up. Fortunately, the Iran-Iraq war ends in a complete stalemate. Not one inch of land is gained or lost, although many lives are lost during this thing. Let's move on. Feud continues now. 1989, Ayatollah Khomeini dies, and this turns into a completely wild scene. The funeral is just, people are mourning. The vehicle that the body's being carried in is mobbed. It's transferred to a helicopter. The helicopter lands at the burial place to drop the body off, and people storm the area that they're going to bury the body. The body is ripped out of the wood casket that it's in. The Iranians, the military, pull the body back onto the helicopter, and they dust off again and get away. They announce that they're going to postpone the funeral. Although in Islamic rites, they like to have the body buried the same day, and so they they get the crowd to disperse. They come back with a helicopter, but they hear the helicopter come in, and all the people come back. Again, it's a wild scene. They just basically throw his body in the ground, put a bunch of steel containers on top of it, and then disperse the crowd. But in the aftermath, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, Khamenei is the proper pronunciation, although you'll probably hear Khamenei as the anglicized pronunciation. He becomes the supreme leader, replacing Khomeini. Khamenei. There's a very distinct difference there, but it does confuse people from time to time. Now, the Iraq invasion of Kuwait in 1990 actually focuses our attention elsewhere for a good period of time. Iran simmered down during this point. They're still giving money to terror groups, but they're not our focus. Iraq becomes our focus. They become our whipping boy in the Middle East. In 97, Mohammed Khatami is a reformist who is elected. To run in Iran as president, you have something called the Guardian Council. And the Guardian Council, um, I'll, I'm most of my sources are books, but we can talk. Send me a message later about sources. But uh, the Iraq invasion of Kuwait shifts our focus, and we see the election of a reformist to run for president in Iran. You have to get past the Guardian Council. The Guardian Council can say yes or no to any candidate running for president. This becomes a little bit interesting as we move along here recently. But they missed the boat on Khatami. They didn't think that he was going to get elected at all, and he gets elected by about 60% of the vote. Um, and during this period of time, there's actually a really good thawing of relations between the United States and Iran. We're exchanging sports teams. We're seeing uh, you know, students are being exchanged between Tehran University and the United States. In fact, I had a professor that spent a year in Iran during this time on a State Department program. Um, there were lots of good things. We're allowing some businesses to go back in there. We're allowing medical supplies to flow back in, and 9/11 happened, and the Iranians mourned. I mean, it was a very outpouring of grief that was shown by the Iranians. And again, remember, the Iranians were not involved in 9/11 at all. This was they're Shiites. The Sunnis were, Osama bin Laden is a Sunni. There was no support from the Iranian regime for this action at all. But February of 2002, George Bush gets up for a joint session of Congress and lumps Iran in with uh, Iraq and North Korea as an axis of evil. Now, remember, we've already gone into war with Afghanistan at this point, but he's signaling that there are these three other countries that he doesn't like. And Iran felt the reformers in Iran felt betrayed because they were yes, Iran was still doing a lot of the Republican Guard. The military was still funneling funds to terrorists, but there were some reforms that were going on, um, and reform doesn't happen overnight. But they felt stabbed in the back. And what happened is that Khatami, is already in his second term, and he can't run for reelection. So Iran elects um, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. He's a populist mayor of Iran. He's elected president. They increase the uranium enrichment. They, in response, we do some deals to halt the enrichment. Those are broken. Ahmadinejad really just loves being a thorn in the side of President Bush. Basically, because Bush really, insults Iran, especially in that axis of evil thing. As a populist, as a nationalist, he's like, nobody talks bad about my folks. So, he really, he challenges Bush to several debates. They start to engage in a proxy war in Iraq. The Iranians were getting in bed with some Shiite groups in Iraq, and they were attacking U.S. troops. U.S. with troops were doing the same thing with Kurdish troops in the areas of Iran, attacking Iranian interests. Um, but that rhetoric was not really popular at home. Local Iranians were suffering. So in 2009, Ahmadinejad is up for re-election, and by most people's accounts, he probably lost by about 65% of the vote, but it was rigged, and he wins, and there's a green revolution in the streets, and it fails. It fails miserably because the U.S. didn't really get involved with it. So again, the reformists feel betrayed by the United States. It's I mean, to me, I don't know where we could have gotten involved in that outside of funneling weapons. And my criticism of U.S. foreign policy is that we try and meddle too much. So I was disappointed that the Green Revolution failed, but I'm glad that we didn't get involved. Mahmoud Ahmadinejad was very vocal proponent of Iran's nuclear enrichment, and which Iran's nuclear program was actually started by the United States in 1957 through the Atoms for Peace project. So they've had nuclear stuff going on since 1957. Uh, but with the enrichment, the United States and Israel decided to act, and they did the Stuxnet attack. Um, and the Israelis killed a couple of Iranian nuclear physicists. The Stuxnet attack actually took out a good portion of the Iranian nuclear capability, but it also backfired. As a common theme of American foreign policy is blowback. As the Stuxnet attack came back to the United States and took down some hospitals and caused some issues. So, but there was also continued back and forth issues in the Gulf. The Iranians were taking they took at least one British fast boat and an American fast boat at one point. There was continued threats about bombing or putting mines in the Gulf again, but they were able to kind of survive that Mahmoud Ahmadinejad time by getting through. They got through 2013, and he could not run for re-election. And another reformer, but a very moderate reformer with a long history and ties to the regime, Hassan Rouhani, was elected. But he was a reformer and wanted to get better relations with the United States. So they started entering in negotiations in 2014 and created something called the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. The key thing about this thing is it was not a treaty. So Barack Obama did not have to take this to the Senate to get ratified. It was an agreement. And in turn for reducing enrichment down to a minuscule non-weapons grade generating amount at 3.6, the United States would remove sanctions and pull sanctions off of specific Iranian leaders. One of the controversies that happened right around the same time was, the Iranians let go four American people who were being held in Evin prison. One of them was a journalist, Jason Rezaian, with I believe the Washington Post. And at the same time, there was a large cash transfer of around $2 billion back to Iran, and people thought that this was a payoff. What the official United States version of this was money that the Shah had spent on weapons that were not delivered, that were being returned to the Iranians, I think, with interest. You can believe what you want to believe with that one, but that's what happened there. Let's see. Judith says, and Americans generally hold anyone from the Middle East responsible. People I knew were afraid to tell they immigrated from there. Instead, most were saying that they're Persian. It's kind of like United States Americans going over into Europe and saying they're Canadian. Yeah, the 2000s were a very tough time. It still are. Trump years were very tough. Let's see. Yes, I should be citing. Yeah, I mean, I could, but that would drag this on much, much, much further. But again, reach out to me if you have questions. I'll be happy to drop you some sources. Let's see. So Trump takes office in 2017, and first thing he does is block travel, and Iran is one of those countries that he blocks travel from. The second thing he does is backs out of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, slaps a bunch of sanctions on Iranian officials, and one of them we'll talk about here in a minute. Tensions escalate. There's the Saudi-Iranian proxy war in Yemen. In fact, the first military intervention that Donald Trump did as president was firing missiles into Yemen, which killed a bunch of kids. But he continued to funnel arms and money to Saudi to continue to fight this proxy war in Yemen. Yemen is still just absolutely devastated. It's still going on, the war there. There were a couple of attacks on tankers in the Persian Gulf. During a visit to Baghdad, the head of the Iranian Republican Guard, Qasem Soleimani, was assassinated by the United States, possibly Israel. Um, Kind of a really kind of messed up attack. It's to take somebody out on their own soil is one thing, but to get them on someone else's soil was a huge black eye for the Iraqis. It caused a lot of international consternation. Iran decides to retaliate by shooting missiles into Iraq, hitting a base there. That there were some U.S. military personnel that were injured. U.S. has never really come straight on what kind of injuries they got from this attack, but also in the shoot down or the shooting of these missiles, the Iranians mistook a outbound. I'm still trying to figure out the math on this. They mistook a outbound jet from Tehran International Airport as a missile coming into Tehran, and shot down the Ukrainian passenger jet. All people, of course, were killed, and we're talking, it becomes a huge international incident because most of the plane had Canadian Iranians on the plane, and they were the Canadians have taken the lead on the investigation, which the results were just released, which found Iran at fault. Surprise, surprise. Now we're talking today. So Joe Biden elected, and I know that some people are probably going to say, no, he wasn't elected, but Joe Biden was elected, and he wants back in the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. So JCPOA, he wants back in, but he wants Iran to make concessions. Now, this is kind of an interesting thing because the United States is the one that got out of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. So they want Iran to make concessions before they get back into discussions. Now, I understand, but when we got out of the deal, Iran went back to enriching uranium. Now they're up to about from intelligence sources, they say that they're up to about 60%. I'm not sure what to believe when it comes from intelligence sources, but they're up to 60% enrichment, which is well above weapons grade at this point. Iran wants the sanctions lifted off of their folks. That's a big key thing that they want to get the sanction relief so that they can get things like medicine and stuff into the country, begin dealing with American companies. That was another big thing that they lost from when the JCPOA was abrogated. Recently, the United States seized several Iranian media websites for doing misinformation. It was an investigation. They submitted a warrant to an American company that was hosting these websites, and all these websites were taken down and seized. If you ever seen a website seized by the United States, it has that nice the two seals talking about it was seized by the Department of Justice and the Department of Commerce as well as involved in the seizing of these websites. I would be interested to I always try and take a look at this from the Iranian perspective. What if Iranian was the hegemon and they were able to seize U.S. websites, media websites for disinformation? How we would react? And I don't think I would be too happy. I'm sure a lot of people wouldn't be too happy. Although there's some websites that are kind of annoying. But the other big thing that has happened recently, and this was last week, is a gentleman named Ibrahim Raisi, who was their equivalent to the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, was elected president. He ran in 2017 against Hassan Rouhani and lost, but he was put in place by, put into very lucrative positions to put him into, kind of stage him as the next president. He is a hardliner, and lots of words out there saying that he's a possible successor to Khamenei. And there was lots of accusations, not like the election itself was rigged, but how he got got elected was rigged, and that the Guardian Council threw off a ton of candidates. There are about 4 candidates. Generally, there are a lot more candidates running for president. There are only 4 and very weak candidates. Um, and in fact, the number of blank ballots that were submitted in this election were more than the second place finisher. They were about 14% blank spoiled ballots uh, submitted in this election, and the second place finisher had about 13.8%. That kind of tells you a little bit of level of the disgust of the people of Iran. We're still trying to determine where he stands on the JCPOA talks. He has issued a couple of statements, but we're not sure completely where he stands on whether he wants to get back into this. Um, Again, the reformists are very disappointed. This was the lowest turnout election in Iranian history since the overthrow of the Shah, and I think there was about 49%, which U.S. tends to have lower turnout elections, but we haven't had a turnout that low since the second Clinton election when there was 49% turnout for the United States. So, the reformists are just not turning out now. They don't believe in the reform. They believe, I think they understand that even if they get a reformist in, that the United States is not there to help them out. And, we're shooting ourselves in the foot. So, my takeaways from this and the takeaways I hope you get from this, and again, I get that you wanted references in here. Um, can't put them in the middle of this, but again, reach out to me. I'd love to share with you the information that I've been getting. Iran has every reason to be angry with the United States. Just simple flashpoints in the histories from Operation Ajax to the chemical weapons in the Iran-Iraq War. Um, you know, to the sanctions that they put on the Iranian people, where they don't get basic medical stuff. Sanctions I think are probably one of the worst things that the United States government does, in that they are never really felt by the people in power that they want to put them on. They're felt by the people, and the number of people that have been killed because of sanctions, because they haven't been able to get the medical stuff that they need, is just awful. Iran does. They are once proud country. I mean, they had a 2,500-year empire, and they are kind of relegated. They're marginalized. Again, they don't have access to. They're not able to sell their oil in the open market. They're not able to buy medical supplies. Um, they're completely hamstrung. So, a once proud country is being marginalized by the United States. Um, where it comes into conflict is that Iran does want to be the regional hegemon. And when the United States is the global hegemon, uh, right or wrong, and I think it's wrong, uh, it's going to always come into conflict because, the U.S. isn't going to want somebody saying, "Hey, man, I run this hood. This is my place." No, uh, that's always going to create conflict with the United States. And the United States hamstrung their reformers at every step of the way. Whether it's the axis of evil speech or the Donald Trump jumping out of the JCPOA. He's hamstrung even the most moderate of reformers in Iran, and now we're dealing with hardliners again. And my personal opinion is that the United States has no right at all to demand concessions in an agreement that it had abrogated. If you want to if you want to demand concessions, it should be a completely brand new agreement. But to get back into an agreement with the Iranians, we have no leg to stand on with this. So anyway, let's talk questions. Anybody have questions of what I've been talking about? Yep, I see, Adam. Absolutely, definitely something I should definitely add as we go forward. Libertarian Party. Yeah, yeah, I get you. I will do better. Read Hazlitt and stop the Gabor. Okay, thanks. All right, going once, going twice. Okay, everybody. Thanks everyone for joining us on the Political Deep Dive this week. Next week we are off um, for the July 4th holiday. I am actually also celebrating a birthday that weekend, so I will be out relaxing, recharging the batteries. We'll be back in a couple weeks. We're going to try and have Anthony Welty on in a couple weeks, although there's a LNC meeting that might take precedence on this channel in a couple weeks. So just stay tuned. I'll be happy to drop out some information for everybody to let them know. Again, remember lp.org /50 for the 50th anniversary, or lp.50.lp.org to get involved in the LP 50th anniversary party. Love to come hang out with you folks. And in the LP training, let's get that training out there. Regional affiliate and campaign training initiative. Go to that website if you want to get trained and get out there and run campaigns for the LP or run an affiliate for the LP. I'd love to see you in Norfolk if you're in the Region 5 area. If not, love to see you at the 50th. And if not, love to see you at Reno in Memorial Day weekend of 2022. But thanks everyone for joining us tonight. Actually, we got some stuff. There we go. Thanks, Jose Castaneda. Thank you, sir. I really appreciate it. Peterson Jane, thank you. Yes, After Dark. We are going to have an After Dark show in here in about 18 minutes on my personal Facebook, the Political Deep Dive Facebook group, and my personal YouTube page, which is Papaduke, Papaduke. Would love to see you guys come on and join us for that. Tom for 52 says, "Woot!" I agree, absolutely. Tom Queter, thank you, sir, for joining us this evening. But give it to Tom Queter's campaign. He's running for 52nd. Was a House district in New York. Go ahead and drop your website in there. Tom's a great activist, great voice for liberty in New York, and we love Tom and support him and want to see him get elected to office in New York. So anyway, drop your link in the chat, and I encourage everyone to follow him. Anyway, thanks everyone for joining us this week, and I will see everyone either on After Dark or I'll also be hosting Libertarians at Large on Thursday on my birthday. So come join me. Hey, I got the last name right. Yes, absolutely. I'm sorry about that, Jose. But I'll be hosting Libertarians at Large on Thursday because Eric Raudsep is on his honeymoon. Congratulations to him. Well earned. And I'll be hosting that with Val and Laura Ebke, and I believe Ashley Shade will be joining us that night as well. So anyway, thanks everyone for joining us, and we will talk to you soon. Thank you for joining us on the Political Deep Dive. We air every Sunday night at 8 p.m. Eastern. You can get regular updates on our show and our guests by following us on social media on Facebook.com/ThePoliticalDeepDive, all one word, on Twitter.com/PoliticalDeep, all one word, on YouTube.com/Papaduke, Papaduke, on Twitch.tv, The Political Deep Dive, all one word, and on Mondays, the audio of this episode is uploaded to SoundCloud.com/ThePoliticalDeepDive, all one word. And you can join in on the fun on Instagram.com/ThePoliticalDeepDive, all one word. The best way to support the Liberty Movement is to join the Libertarian Party at lp.org. Give us a like, a share, and a subscribe on whatever platform you're watching from. It helps extend our reach, and we greatly appreciate it. We look forward to seeing you next Sunday night at 8 p.m. Eastern.